Former USS Cole commander Kirk Lippold. Commander, obviously these are fast and furious developments here, but you've heard obviously from the administration and Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, more to the point, it's a one-off, a one and done. That is, I assume, listening to Nikki Haley over at the United Nations today, that there aren't more chemical attacks. What do you think?
Well, I think, Neil, you're hearing exactly right. It's one, and we hope it's done. We want to make sure that this is sending a strong signal to both the Syrian government, Bashar al-Assad, that use of chemical weapons will not be tolerated, and reinforcing or enforcing that red line from a few years ago. There are now going to be consequences for doing it. It's also telling the Russians, you cannot be complicit with, aid and abet what is going on when you know these things happen. So you're going to have to help us stop the Assad regime from doing these kinds of acts against their own people.
Let me ask you about this, Kirk. When you step back from this and you see now a Russian warship moving in the area to sort of get within, I guess, visible distance of these American ships from which these Tomahawk missiles were launched, let me just play a hypothetical here. Let's say we have a follow-up attack because Assad once again uses chemical weapons or tries to launch them on his own people. What do you think the Russian ship does then?
I think they would probably be in observe mode. I don't think they're going to do anything. I think it would be very unlikely that they would attempt to engage and shoot the Navy ships in order to stop the attack. I think we would be well prepared if they were to shoot missiles at us to defend ourselves and take whatever action is necessary. But I really don't believe that's even going to come to that. I don't think that you're going to see President Putin want that type of escalation, especially at sea, where the Russians really don't have as much presence as the U.S. Navy does.
Commander, what did you make of the fact that we gave the Russians a heads up, and furthermore that the Russians apparently didn't give the Syrians a heads up to our heads up, because a lot of their planes, a lot of the same ones that launched the chemical attacks were still on the runways?
Well, I think what you're seeing, Neil, is that delicate interplay with diplomacy and the military coming in. Obviously, we wanted to give the Russians a heads up to give them an opportunity to make sure that their people were safeguarded and were not going to be the subject of the attack, either on purpose or by accident. The fact that the Russians did not tell the Syrians, clearly there's a delicate balance there. When you look at it, Russia is deeply engaged in supporting the Assad regime. By the same token, when they watch the Assad regime engage in these horrific acts of using chemical weapons, which the Russians say they shouldn't have because they verified that they got rid of all of them, it's clearly putting them on the carpet as well. And I'm sure that President Putin does not like that. So at this point, I'm sure that he is also looking for a way to send a signal to Bashar al-Assad. We will tolerate you doing certain things to your people to stay in power, but this one crossed the line, and there's a price that we're just going to turn a blind eye to.
You know, you hit on a key point, as you always do, Commander. The Russians were embarrassed in this, assuming that they had taken as a given that Assad didn't have any more chemical weapons because he had either committed to them that he hadn't, or they checked on it, they lied, who knows. But now the gig is up, right? And so the Russians then have to find a way to extricate themselves from this. But they went on another tangent today saying that this was a provocative act. I think they told their own people, the Russian people, that the U.S. was planning this action prior to this chemical attack, or I don't believe they called it that, earlier in the week. What do you make of that, and that they're now painting the U.S. as the aggressor here?
Well, I would look at it, Neil, as you've got posturing and you've got reality. The Russians have to give a certain amount of, red meat to their populace as well to build up that nationalism that keeps Putin in power. By the same token, they also know the reality of the situation on the ground. The use of chemical weapons cannot be tolerated. They are party to the treaty that prohibits that as well. So they know that if they are complicit with it, eventually that shadow is going to get cast across their path. They're going to be held responsible, and they do not want to be seen in the eyes of the world as contributing to those acts themselves.
I think this dispenses with the notion that the love fest is there, and that between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, and that the two would never say anything nasty to each other or do anything nasty, or this notion that Donald Trump was beholden to Vladimir Putin, because judging by the Russian reaction today, they don't appear to be too happy.
Well, I think at the end of the day, President Trump is going to take U.S. national security interests, like everything else he's done with his Make America Great slogan, and he is going to put our nation first. our national interests first. And he's not going to really care about what Putin wants. He will take that into the context of framing his picture strategically for what is in the U.S. national security interests on the global stage. By the same token, he has to act in a manner that clearly sets our interests first and foremost. Because this was also a signal to another major player in the region, the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, which was also telling Iran, chemical weapons will not be tolerated. Crossing that line from being a state actor using them to perhaps you giving them to Hezbollah or other forces and allowing the Iranians to let terrorist groups use chemical weapons, there will be major consequences for doing that, which is a good signal that he sent.
All right, Commander, very good seeing you again. Thank you.